All right, we are going live. So for those of you who are on this call, if you can do me a favor, I do this at the beginning of every single webinar. I love doing this. It's one of my favorite parts, which is to ask you, first of all, if you can see me and hear me, or see us and hear us. And if you can go to the chat on the right-hand side and just type in if you can hear me or hear us and see us, but then also tell me where you are writing in from, because normally we get like a United Nations of attendees here from every corner of the globe. It is kind of remarkable. God knows what time it is in half of these places, but you're still here. So far I am not seeing anyone in the chat, which is it doesn't fill me with confidence that the audio visual side of this presentation is working, but maybe people are just being shy. So I'm going to write in the chat box to hello to anyone and see if anyone shows up here, because normally it is a flood of people writing in where they're writing in from. So Kayla, everything good? Can you hear us on your end? Is that you can text me or ping me in Slack or whatever. This is radio silence. Is not not normal. Hang on a second. I'm getting a text in here. Let's see if okay. Yep, all good. We can hear you.
Someone is in the chat.
Say again.
Someone from London is in the chat.
Hang on.
Oh, it's not working for me either.
Oh, here we go. Now it's for some reason my chat was like hooked up. We got Wisconsin and London. So they're basically identical. Wisconsin and London are almost entirely different. So, but that's good. And Blurb's office, okay, good. I don't know why my chat was sort of was hung up there for a second. San Francisco, East Bay, Utah, Southern California, right on. Okay, good. All right, so we're going to start this. Let me just give you a heads up here for a couple of things. One, this webinar, like all the rest of the webinars, will be archived on the Blurb YouTube channel. So if you miss it today, you will be able to see it. And I just completely lost my screen. Are you guys still there by any chance?
Yes.
I'm here.
I just completely lost my entire Demio screen.
Well, I do. So we're kind of shaded out, and I have a green box that says "Going Live" on top of our photos or our. You know.
Wow. Okay, hang on. It just came back. So I can't see myself anymore, but I'm just going to go ahead and keep going. So I'm having some technical issues on my end. So what I was saying was that the webinar will be archived on the Blurb YouTube channel. And if you have any questions or you want to say something or ask something or whatever, go into the chat on the right-hand side and make sure that you get your questions in there so that we can answer them later in the webinar. What we're going to do is this is going to be a webinar of thirds. I'm going to handle the first third, and then our guests are going to handle the second third, and then we're going to take Q&A at the end. So for whatever reason, I can't see myself, and I don't know if you can see Michelle and Melissa, but I'm going to introduce our guests. And today's webinar is about gifting made easy, and notebooks and photo books and Blurb BookWright. But the idea here is really about making notebooks and journals and using photo books. We have two special guests today who are pretty incredible bookmakers and talented in a variety of other ways. But I wanted to introduce them, and then they're going to disappear for a bit and come back. But Michelle Fifis is a successful textile designer and founder of Pattern Observer Studio. On her blog, Pattern Observer, she writes about business and textile design, and her membership community, the Textile Design Lab, offers learning and networking opportunities to hundreds of designers worldwide. And if you haven't been on Pattern Observer, you should really check it out. It's a site that, for me, just immediately made me want to make things that I don't have any idea how to make. So it's a very creative site and a very inspiring site, to say the least. Our second guest is Melissa Schulz, who is the founder of Branded Licensing, and she works in collaboration with Pattern Observer Studio to curate and license a broad portfolio of artwork for fashion, stationery, gifts, and other home products. She has a vast experience as a creative leader associated with brands like Hallmark, Hard Rock, American Greetings, and Kathy Davis, to name a few. And she has over 20 years experience in the art licensing and product development fields. And she brings this knowledge to help artists, direct artists to make relevant art for products, which is a really interesting world that I wish I knew more about. So hopefully we're going to learn a little bit about that today. And without further ado, welcome to both of you, Melissa and Michelle. And hopefully you can still hear me and see me. I'm flying a little bit blonde here, but so they are going to disappear for a couple of minutes, and I'm going to start this webinar. And apparently people can still see me, so that's a good thing. Okay, good. So the gift of notebooks and journals. I am Dan Milnor. I'm the creative evangelist for Blurb. Most of you know that. I'm the same droning voice that you've heard month after month here on the Blurb webinar. And I have a little admission to make here starting out, which is I am a compulsive journal and notebook keeper. And I think as a creative person, as a visual person, as a storyteller, I don't know if there's any single thing that's more important to do and simultaneously more fun to do than to keep notebooks. This addiction started for me in 1993. I was a very fledgling professional photographer, and I was at the Phoenix Public Library, and I came across a book, which I recommend for all of you, that is called The Adventures and Misadventures of Peter Beard in Africa. And Peter Beard is a photographer, an artist, a very unique individual. He's American, but he moved to Kenya in the 50s. And he's a compulsive journal maker, and his journals are off the charts beautiful. They're incredible, basically art objects. And I found this book and I looked at it and I thought, you know, this seems like a thing that's tailor-made for me. And I started journaling in 1993, and I have journaled every day since that time. And I've got literally, and I'll show you a few more images here in a minute, but I've got literally hundreds and hundreds of these. And the journals that I make are comprised of all kinds of things. I do a lot of writing. There's a little bit of artwork, and then I have like ephemera from my life. And these, if you look closely, don't look too closely because it's kind of scary, but these are my elementary school photos. I think I have Winnie the Pooh on one of my shirts here. And yes, if you can tell by the haircut, my mother literally used a bowl to cut my hair, and kind of scary. But anyway, I use things like this, and I glue and tape and use acrylics and oil paints and everything else. Journaling is a really wonderful thing. It's also incredibly therapeutic to me. So keeping notebooks and journals is a powerful thing in my opinion. And I was so happy a couple of months ago when Blurb announced that they had a notebook and journal option. So anyway, I'm just checking my text here to make sure that we're technically on the even playing field. So these are just a handful of my journals drying on my patio. These got a little bit damp a few years ago, but I've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these boxes of journals. So as you can see, it is a wee bit compulsive for me in my lifestyle. And I'm hoping that after this webinar, some of you will put a pen to paper and create one of these and start, because I think it's life-changing. So I love this quote from Einstein: the most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. And I think regardless of what we talk about on this webinar or any other webinar, anytime we talk about anything in relationship to bookmaking, I think that this is an absolutely profound idea to keep in mind, because oftentimes when I find people are making books, especially people new to bookmaking or journal making or notebooks, is that they make the books that they think they're supposed to make and not the book that they actually want to make. And I think the book that you think you're supposed to make is a short-term game. But the book that's inside you that you feel you really have to make, that's the breakthrough book and the most important thing you can do. So just keep that in mind. Why do notebooks and journals make great gifts? Well, I'm so glad you asked that, because I have a whole list of reasons why. And I'm telling you this based on the fact that I have been making books and using them as gifts since 1993, so which is probably longer than some of this time. We're just joking about this before we went live on the webinar about why books are so great as gifts. The first reason is inspiration. Books, especially when they're personal material, there's something inherent in human DNA that says do not throw a book away. And if any of you have ever moved in your lifetime, which I'm assuming is all of you, you always end up with those massive stack of boxes of books, and you think to yourself, well, I can't get rid of those. And I think books are inspirational in a very unique way, and is one of the reasons why they're a great gift. Two, they're inexpensive. Yes, you can make expensive books, but there's you don't need to do that. Some of the best gifts I've made for my family were small soft cover volumes of individual family members, like a niece or a nephew, that I would then give to the parents and my grandparents, etc., which of course makes you look incredible in the eyes of the rest of the family. Three, stocking stuffers. Now, a little history lesson. I am the youngest of three kids. So when you look at our mantle and the stockings, my father gets the giant one. My mom's is a little smaller. And as you go down, my stocking is like the size of my mouse. I get ripped off every year. So small books, perfect stocking stuffers. And again, this book will be in your family forever. Next is books are personal, and I cannot stress this enough. I think, it's easy to go online and to buy a gift for someone that really has no sort of sentimental value, that's something that may be here for one day and gone the next. Our landfills are filled with this stuff. Books are personal, and that is one of the best things you can possibly give. And lastly, more importantly, maybe than any of the rest of these, is that books are timeless. And I'm sure that many of you, your families are very similar to mine in the sense that we have photo albums that are going back for generations. So my mother was our visual historian for our family. She passed the baton to me several years ago and said, I'm not taking pictures anymore. It's on you to record the family, which is now my role. And my mother's mother before her was the historian and we have albums and books left over from literally 100 years ago. So great reasons to make books. And I'm just seeing in the chat that Demio's having some issues. We're trying to get things fixed. So hopefully you guys are still with me. Now let's talk a little bit about software. So if you want to make notebooks and journals with Blurb, the way that you do that is with the BookWright software. And BookWright is the standalone software. It's free, downloadable. And when you download and open BookWright, you're going to be greeted with this welcome screen. And the welcome screen, as you'll see, these are my books over here and importing and ordering. But right now, you'll see new books. And that's the link that you click on. And when you click on that, it brings you to this page, which is your first page of options, where you're choosing your college ruled or narrow ruled pages. You can choose your grids and all the different customizations you want. And when you're done with that screen, you go to the size options. And the great thing is you have 3 sizes, 5/8, 6x9, and 8x10, which are also corresponding to the Blurb trade book sizes. These are awesome. I love these books. I love trade books in general, and these are great sizes for journals. Now, when you've made all your choices and selections, you'll see BookWright will open to the basic interface page, and you'll notice it loads right in here, and notebooks will automatically pop up, and you'll see all the different page design options here. So you can do solid grid, dot grid, wide ruled, blank pages, etc. And the great thing is you're not stuck with any one particular style. So I encourage you, the journal I'm using right now, which I'll show you in a minute, it has every kind of page imaginable in there. So don't think that you have to be just do one. And the last thing I'm going to say about this is the beauty of the journal is you can drag in any content you want to drag in. So I'm constantly bringing a lot of imagery in, a lot of all kinds of different materials into the books, and then I write over the top of all of them. And again, I'll show you this in a second just for fun. So I know people are out there refreshing, and again, we're going to archive this. We're going to archive this. Oh yeah, the attendee number just skyrocketed. So I'm hoping that more people are able to get on now. Anyway, I'm just going to keep going here. So when you get to the Blurb website, this is what the landing page of notebooks and journals looks like. And it's pretty simple. And I wanted to show you, and hopefully you can see this. So I'm actually using a copy of the journal that is featured on this page. And just to show you a little kind of style of what my journal normally looks like, I put a lot of images inside the journal and the notebook, and some of these are printed in that I've dragged in the software, and others are prints that I've made separately and glued in here, and then I typically write over everything. So I'm constantly adding all kinds of different material in here. Hopefully there's nothing in here that's going to get me in trouble, but there's my wife and I in a little photo strip, my boarding pass. So I love these journals. Now, the other thing I want to tell you is that I've been using this for several weeks now, and it's held up incredibly well, and I'm not easy on my journals at all. This is going in and out of a variety of different bags. I'm writing in different conditions and stuff, and I've been really surprised actually how well this is held up. But you can also see that some of these pages are lined pages, and then I've got grids in the back, so it's really fun. Pretty simple to use. Any questions, let us know in the chat on the right. And again, these are a really wonderful gift. In fact, I think I might print one of these and give every member of my family a journal and just see what happens. Because I can see my brother and sister going like, please, you gave us a journal, but hey, I'm going to do it anyway. Okay, so another gift idea if you don't want to make a notebook or a journal, is you can make a photo book. And this is really what the backbone of Blurb was built on, was photo books. So if you go back to 2005, 2006, when Blurb first came along, the photo book was what we were built on, and we still are very much known for making photo books. Now, photo books are different from notebooks and journals in the sense that they're a little bit more pricey, but your material choices and your size choices, so archival paper, different binding, end sheet options, customizations, and bigger sizes and things like that. So photo books are pretty amazing, and I just wanted to show you one sample of a photo book that I did and then used as a gift. So I grew up on a ranch in Wyoming, and in 2007, the summer of 2017, the total solar eclipse went over, the path of totality passed right over our ranch. So I went back to Wyoming. I hadn't been there in many years, went back and did a project on this. And so what I did, this is an 8x10 Blurb hardcover photo book that I made in both lay flat and regular non-lay flat. And what I did is I did a lot of writing. I went back and I wrote about memories of my parents. And I used what I'll call historical imagery here, which are images of my parents in the 50s and 60s, mixed in with a lot of new material. And then I took things, so when I was a little boy in Wyoming, my parents would drive me out in the middle of fields, drop me off with like a little .22 rifle and some water and some food. And my job was, I had this little notebook and I had to like take notes about the cattle. And so I took all this ephemera and these artifacts from the time frame, scanned them, and ended up putting them in these books, because this made a really personal gift, because everybody in my family can look at this and know exactly what it is. I also did a series of paintings that corresponded to the eclipse, which I scanned and added to the book. I did a lot of new photographic work, which looks like this. I took a lot of notes, et cetera, and I ended up making, this singular book as a gift. So I'm going to turn my video off here because I'm getting a little more technical issues. So why did this make such a great gift? One is the only person in my family who knew it was coming was my sister, who was with me on the trip. Nobody else knew. So when this book arrived, it was a complete surprise, but everybody in the family we have such ties to that region and that place that it was like revisiting the past for everybody in the family. The lay flat version is absolutely gorgeous. It was a little expensive to print for everyone, so I made a lay flat version for myself to use as a portfolio. And then I printed a regular version of the book with our Proline uncoated paper, which is absolutely gorgeous. It's my favorite Blurb paper, actually. If you're going to do a high-end book, that's my personal favorite. But this was a book, and again, we were joking about this earlier. I gave this to my mother, who looked at me just with this bewildered look on her face, and she said, "Who did this book?" And I said, "I did." And it just didn't compute. Like, how is this humanly possible? Why would someone do a book on our family, et cetera? Which rocketed me to pole position in the family hierarchy of my brother and sister and I. So if you want to rocket to pole position in your family, I highly suggest you do this. So that is my take on notebooks, journals, photo books, and using them as gifts. Again, if you have any questions, ping it on the right side. So I'm going to keep my camera off, and I'm going to pass the webinar now over to Michelle and Melissa, and hopefully, my fingers are crossed here that they are going to be able to come on and take over their portion.
That's beautiful. I can see why that rocketed you to the second position in the sibling thing. I copied and pasted the link to our Blurb bookstore there in the chat room, so everyone can see that as well, because we recently launched a line of journals and notebooks through Blurb, and we were so excited about the process. Oh yeah, I can change the slides, so that's nice. So when we decided to launch our line of journals and notebooks, we wanted to include our community called the Textile Design Lab. We're a membership community of about 650 members, and we wanted to take this opportunity to highlight how talented they are and all the amazing work that they were creating. So I'm going to take everyone through this process a bit, and hopefully you can pull some elements of our process into your own journal and notebook creation process as well. So what we did was we identified 5 trends for our members. We also provided, within that brief, we outlined a number of themes that we'll talk about in a moment that we thought were really key and were relevant to our community and that we wanted to include in our line of custom notebooks and journals. And we gave all members briefs. They had one brief to design using the Blurb software. So everyone downloaded the software, they used it, they loved it. Our community is really skilled in Adobe software, and they found the Blurb software to be really easy to use, and everyone enjoyed that process. So once they submitted their work, we chose one winner from each category, and you can see the winners there. We cheated a little bit. I'll talk about that in a minute. In a minute, for one category, we chose 2 winners. And so what I wanted to talk about now are some of the themes that we chose. We knew that the holidays were coming up, and so we wanted to include notebooks and journals that would be great gifts for other people, but also for oneself. The New Year's is coming up as well, and that's such a wonderful time to buy a journal for yourself, to motivate you in the new year, maybe reflect on the past year. And so that was something that we kept in mind as we were coming up with the themes that I'll share with you. So the first theme that we had was a quote journal. Obviously, this is a journal or notebook for quotes, but given that our community is so design oriented, we wanted to make sure that we left room for sketches, lots of room for exploring other ideas that quotes tend to bring up. So there's a place within this journal for writing down the quote and the author, but also lots of room for exploring and sketching as well. The second theme was a list journal. Like so many of you, I'm obsessed with making lists. So this was a selfish theme that we chose because I thought it would be so nice to have a beautiful book. Of course, you can always use a plain notebook for lists, but I thought it would be nice to have a really beautiful place to keep a lot of those lists that might be more important than like a grocery store list. This third theme really resonated with our community, and it was a really fun topic to explore. I have 2 daughters, and my older daughter, Ruth, is 6 years old, and she has a really difficult time calming down at night and going to sleep. So something that we do kind of informally is we talk about things that we were grateful for in our day. And sometimes I thought it would be helpful to have some prompts to help guide me or guide her through this process. So I thought a children's gratitude journal would be just such a wonderful gift to give a friend or family member during the holiday season. And this was where we cheated, and there were just so many amazing submissions for this theme. Our designers really got involved into this theme that we chose 2 winners for this theme. You can see from Chris and Cynthia there. And then a book journal. Like so many of you, I'm involved in a book club, and so we pick a book to read every month. And I thought having a journal specifically where I can write down thoughts, sketches, just a place to explore different ideas that come about from each of these books that we read each month. It would be so nice to have that at the end of the year to be able to reflect on all the reading that we've done through the year. And so that was inspiration for this book journal theme. And last but not least, we came up with a beverage journal theme. As you all know, craft beverages are just so big in our society right now. So we wanted a place for people to be able to document all the different drinks that they're trying. And we left it open so this could be used for wine or beer or tea or coffee, whatever drink one sort of gets into. And so you can see Esther's beautiful design for this theme. And then we also wanted to create a journal and notebook for our niche community. we focus on surface pattern and textile designers. And I've been wanting, this has been on kind of my to-do list for years, is to create a journal specifically for these designers, where we can explore collection development, pattern development. Within this journal, there's different prompts and exercises for surface pattern design designers and artists. And I think for everyone on this webinar, this is a really fun thing to explore, is to think about your niche in the design world and what journal would you love to create for those in your community. I mean, there's so many little details when you are so knowledgeable about a certain aspect of the design world. And so how can you take that knowledge that you have and put it into a journal or a notebook that will be helpful for others? So that was the inspiration behind that journal. And so in addition to the themes, we wanted to make sure that our members were developing trends and are developing notebooks and journals that were trend appropriate. Our community is very trend driven. You know, it's important to know who you'll be marketing these journals and notebooks to. And we knew that we would be marketing them to people who are very trend oriented. So we identified 5 trends to include within our journals. So I'll share these with you as well today. The first one is confetti. So this idea of celebrating the everyday, even if it's just a notebook or a journal, how can you make that journal so special so that when someone goes to write in it, they get excited and a little more inspired to use the journal. You can see that trend board there. Along the same line, this good vibes theme of focus on optimism. Within the gratitude journal, for example, how can you brighten someone's day by having a positive sentiment on the front of the journal, prompts on the inside of the journal that really help people to recognize the positive things that are going on in their life and be able to celebrate that as well. And here's a trend board for that. And this is how Chris interpreted. I think she did a really beautiful job of interpreting this trend into her work. Geometrics are kind of always trending, but they're such a fun way to explore really fun color palettes and will really appeal to our community. We thought this was just a nice trend to include on journals, and it will appeal to a wide audience as well. And you can see how this trend was interpreted by Claudia for the quote journal, and then in our own Pattern Observer design journal as well. Our fourth trend, nature-inspired doodles. And also, even if you don't want to include nature-oriented imagery, you can also include doodles and sketches that have a more polished look. This is a trend that's really fun. You know, the sketchy, doodly look has been in style for a while now, and we see it being interpreted in more polished formats with natural imagery as well. But we also loved how Nikita took this trend and interpreted it in such a beautiful way for her list journal. And lastly, the retro journal is still really big. Again, we thought this trend would apply to a wide number of our community members, celebrating the past. And you can see how Esther took this trend and interpreted it in her own style and did just such a fantastic job of this in her beverage journal. So we supplied our members with themes, the themes that we covered, the trends that we covered, but we also wanted to make sure that they were thinking about the end user. I think that's so important as you're coming up with these notebooks and journals, even if the end user is your family member or your mother. It's nice to be able to think of that person, think of who will be using these journals. And we wanted to make sure that our members really understood this industry. So Melissa, who is one of our Textile Design Lab team members and our sales rep as well, she was so kind enough to come and speak to our members about what goes on in this industry, what compels someone to purchase or use a journal or notebook. And I'm so glad she's here today to share some of those tips.
Great, thanks. Sorry, I had to put my old lady glasses on, so you'll have to deal with the glare if you can see me. So yeah, it's so, and as we're approaching, I've been doing Christmas shopping when I can on my phone this last week, the new Christmas shopping on your phone, but that when I can, I'm doing it. So gifts are so top of mind right now, and I'm sure I'm not alone in that, having that on my to-do list. And journals and notebooks are something great to consider. I know that whenever I typically try to do something handmade or custom made for my close family and friends, and that is usually the most meaningful gift. They really respond well to that. So doing a custom book, whether it is a photo book or you're creating a journal or a notebook for your friends or family to use, it's perfect. I mean, and then also through the online aspect of selling it, you can create journals and notebooks that you can in turn sell to other people that they can buy and give as gifts. So I think there's so many things to consider, but trend and theme are definitely top of mind, a very good place to start. And Michelle did a great job at highlighting the trends that we were focusing on with the Pattern Observer artists. So that's a great starting point. But then, my catchphrase is making art relevant for products. It's so important. I think we all appreciate beautiful artwork, but when it comes down to applying it to products, sometimes what might be beautiful as just a piece of artwork doesn't quite work on a product. So you have to really think through what the end consumer the end user is going to be using, and how they're going to be using it. So a couple of ideas as we are, headed into gift giving season, approaching the end of the year, the beginning of next year. Consider what types of journals you would gift to someone, or how you would use a journal at this time of year. I know every December, January, I start thinking about my goals for the next year, what my intentions are for the year. And, I'm one of those people, I choose a word of the year and try to remind myself throughout the year to follow through on that goal and follow through on what that word means to me. So that would be a great journal. A great themed journal is, intentions or resolutions or goals. And I mean, the types of pages that Blurb offers that Dan was showing, you could have plain, you could have the grid, you could have lined. I mean, that would just make for such a nice gift for someone as they enter the new year and set some different goals for themselves. Let's see. I will say in my history with product in general, but specifically anything stationery or journal oriented, usually there's a central theme or a central focus as far as the artwork goes. And it might be words that are your central focus, or maybe it's an illustration, but typically there's some sort of a central focus. It's not just an all over pattern. So take time to consider what that might look like. Let's see. Even if you do use a pattern, there's a way to arrange your pattern so that there's a little bit more of a central focus. Or if you have a word, just even the title of what the journal is, that could be your central focus with a pattern. Sentiment-driven products are a trend. Thanks, Michelle, for driving. Are a trend right now, and it's been around. You see, even in home decor, you see pillows and even furniture pieces with words on them. Words are so important to people these days in the marketplace. So consider that when you're designing your journal covers and even the interior. I mean, having some guided messages. I think Michelle was showing earlier some in the gratitude journal. There was a little bit of a guided aspect to it. The interior wasn't just completely blank. So whether it's a quote, whether it's a word that has the central meaning of what your journal is, that's really great to incorporate on the cover. I will say in the, I don't know, we'll just say handfuls of years that I've been in this industry, I've seen many consumer tests. And I will say anything that has art and words on the product, the art is what attracts the end consumer. So we're always drawn to, you can test yourself on this next time you're at a store. You're always like drawn to the pretty colors, or, oh, that's a great pattern, or whatever the imagery is. You're drawn and you walk over, pick up the product and look at it based on the artwork. But what sells that piece, that product, is what it says. So if it has words on it, it's either going to make you buy it or make you put it back down and say, that was a really pretty product, but it's not perfect for me right now because of what it says. So really consider that when you're putting your designs together here. But yeah, it's interesting, and yeah, it's proven time and time again. So be a little guinea pig and try that out next time you're at the store, and you'll totally have that same experience. So important, like I said, thinking about the end purpose, thinking about, how to make it relevant. And Michelle and the team did such a great job in categorizing for the Pattern Observer contest, categorizing the different themes. There's so many, and they had to limit it because we were just trying to shoot for a certain number. There's so many different themes you can try: a travel journal, an idea journal, a pregnancy journal, and you could thematically put together a journal around any occasion in your life, anything that you want to spend time writing or sketching or, collecting imagery and words for. But so really think about it. It's interesting how over the course of time, like I said, about creating beautiful artwork, and then when you apply it with a theme to a product, it's interesting to see how people do it differently. But let me move on to paper trends. Michelle had picked out a handful of trends and created these great trend boards for our contest. I'd say if you're following a trend for journals, there are many different industries to tap into, but I'd say the most applicable industry would be the stationery and gift industries. So look at what's going on with greeting cards. Look what's going on with gift packaging. Look what's going on with other journals out there. There'll be some great trends you can follow and then apply to your own journals. Sometimes, and I'm just saying this too, if you're creating these journals so that you can sell them. Sometimes if you're following a trend that's like in high fashion or something like that, you might be too soon to tap into that trend for the journal market. Usually that's a little bit faster, ahead of us before it gets to paper. So just something to consider in the whole cycle of trends. Another thing with journals, they're year-round gifts. It's not just, it's time for Hanukkah and Christmas gift giving season. It's something, and like I said, it's perfect for me, setting your intentions and your goals for the upcoming year. But it's something that you can give. It's such a thoughtful gift to give at any occasion. Your friend announces that she's getting married or someone's having a baby. These are such touching things that you could do for any of your friends throughout the year. Let's see. So then talking about design, we talked about themes, we talked about trends, some design applications. I had mentioned that a central focus is very important when designing for a journal. And so there are many different ways you can do that. In the examples on the slides right now, so we have the list example, and that's a great overall pattern, but then they eliminated some of the pattern work and have framed in the word list. On the My Thank You journal, the gratitude journal, again, it's an illustration, but it's centralized, which is even that little circle around the text to give it a little focal point. So another way is to collage, and you could collage several patterns. In this case, Chris collaged many different just icons and created a collage pattern for her cover here for the Gratitude Journal for Children. Again, even though it is a collage and there's multiple things going on, your eye totally zooms right into the text. Be always blooming, a gratitude journal. So super important for having that centralized focus. Let's see. Oop. All right. Other ways you can do it. You can have an overall, so we all grew up, right, with composition books, like the black and white, staticky looking composition books with the black binding. So different ways to approach that too. I mean, you can take that basic design formula and apply your artwork to it. So you can have your overall pattern where the black and white is. You can have another pattern where the black binding strip is, or choose a color. And then like where the little nameplate for composition book is, that's where you could put your title or a quote. So that's a really like tried and true design formula for journals and notebooks. Let's see. I think those are some just like general successfully proven design tips. Again, encourage you to really use quotes or words or a title on your journals. And then let's see, just anecdotally, when we were starting this project, I looked at many different journal companies' websites and at retail. Most journals have text on the cover, hands down, like a title, a word, a quote. So I think that's just kind of standard. I mean, you know, you can be crazy and do it however you want, but I think it definitely sets the tone, and it's something you should consider. And I think that's it from my standpoint.
All right. Well, let me check. Can you guys still hear me? You can hear me? Can anyone? Wait a minute. I'm having some technical difficulties. So I just want to make sure, because okay, you can hear me and see me. That's great. So we are now at so I'm asking if you can hear me and see me only because my controls seem to be backwards. So when they're on, I'm actually not on, and et cetera, et cetera. So hopefully you can still see me. We are now to the Q&A section. I just want to say thank you so much to Michelle and Melissa for doing that. I think the journal books that you guys made they make me realize that I have to make better journals. So I would love to get any of those as a gift. So we're on to Q&A. We've got a couple of questions coming in. One is I need to address right off the bat is because there have been a couple of these mentioned in the chat. Yes, this is going to be recorded, and it will be recorded and on Blurb's YouTube channel with all of the rest of the webinars. So someone wrote in earlier and asked about they were doing a photo book and had some other advice that they were looking for. Yes, all of the webinars that we've done are on the Blurb YouTube page, and there's a lot of different topics. So have a look at those. Any questions? Did Melissa or Michelle, did you guys receive any questions that you thought would be poignant, or do you want me to start with my list of questions that I've received from varying people?
I did see an interesting question from Batul. Melissa, you might be able to help her. She was asking how many pages should typically.
Yeah, good question.
I don't know if there's a standard. I mean, I know the journals that I have, it just depends what I'm using it for, how many pages I really want in it. All the journals that I carry with me on the daily basis are a little bit smaller, just to make them more portable. But something I would have sitting at my desk, I definitely would have, like I have some bigger journals that I've had for years that are like super thick, have a high page count, but that's just gonna sit at my desk. So I think it depends, again, thinking about how to make it relevant product to your consumer. What is your end goal? Is this a travel journal? If it's a travel journal, I definitely would go low page count, make it portable, right? If it's you know, if it's something that's just going to sit out more on a desktop or something like that, definitely. I mean, I love like a really chunky, like thick journal. I love that, but it's not reasonable to think someone's going to carry that around with them all the time.
I think too, if you use a hardcover, I think you want more pages, because sometimes if you make a hardcover book and it doesn't have enough pages, the ratio doesn't feel right. It feels cover heavy and not guts heavy. And so I would, like with a soft cover, I think you can get away with almost anything. Even a default, whether it's a 20 or 24 page journal, you could do it. This is probably, I'm guessing, 80 pages, this journal that I've been using, which is a pretty good size. It'll last me for a couple of months. But I agree, I like a big, thick journal as well, but those don't travel that well. The other thing I realized was I made an 8x10 journal with a hardcover. And because it's that size and it has that hardcover on it, it feels almost like a photo book until you get inside and you realize that the paper's really nice for writing on and gluing things in. That almost felt like more of an art book than it did a journal. So maybe it's just a psychological thing, but that was a good question. I also want to reiterate, Lee asked if, does Blurb have a journal section in the shop yet? He said he looked and couldn't find it. So Lee, I mentioned this earlier in the webinar, where when you open BookWright, the welcome screen on the BookWright software will lead you to the notebooks. On the left-hand side, you'll see a tab that says New Notebooks. You click and start there in the process. The other question, and I'm basing this on some of the comments in the chat. I think there's some first-time bookmakers that are on the webinar and people who are new to Blurb. And someone wrote a question that on the surface is very complicated, which is, what's the most simple and very best step-by-step advice for a person who has never created a custom-made book or magazine of any kind? Now, that's kind of a loaded question because it's complicated and we could spend all day on this one question, but there's a couple of steps that I think if you've never done this before, and I just want to list those off very, very quickly, which is start with BookWright, use BookWright software. There's a lot of ways of making books with Blurb, but that's going to be the easiest, and I think the most approachable versions of the software, and it's the best way to make notebooks through Blurb. Start small. Don't try to make some massive project right off the bat if you've never done this, because it's daunting. And what I find is that when people try to bite off more than they can chew, and they try to make these huge books, they get nervous when it comes time to hit print. They go for sometimes years without hitting print. So start small. Just take the minimum page count, soft cover, and go that route. Next, don't try to be perfect the first time you make a book, because chances are you're going to get that first copy and you're going to realize there's things you want to change. And I think sometimes when people have the goal of perfection, again, when it comes time to hit print, they find all kinds of reasons not to do it. And the idea is to get a book in your hands. And lastly, have fun and collaborate. And I think one of the things that I love about what Pattern Observer you guys have done is that these are such wonderful collaborations within your community. And a community like you've created is such a goldmine of inspiration, and also other collaborators that you can say, well, maybe I'm not a great illustrator, but I'm a great writer. And so you can find someone within the community that is a great illustrator, and you partner together, and what you end up with is a book that far, far exceeds anything that you could do on your own. And lastly, I mentioned this briefly, but have fun. This should be a really fun process and not stressful. So stressful bookmakers don't end up printing a whole lot, and people that have fun print everything. Any other questions that you stumbled into? Or I've got a few more here that
go ahead.
that I can go through here. This one is totally unrelated to the webinar, but I have to ask it because it's so out of right field, which is someone wrote in and asked about BookSmart versus BookWright. The answer to that question is BookWright 100% of the time. BookSmart is an old software at Blurb that hasn't been supported in a long time. So definitely use BookWright, and BookWright will lead you directly to notebooks and journals, which is what, and every other platform and every other product that Blurb makes as well. So magazines, photo books, et cetera. It's the best be-all, sort of end-all software. And this is a good question for anyone who's using BookWright, but also this applies to notebooks and journals as well. And I'm not sure if you two were able to do this in the software, but you can, someone asked, can you make and save custom page templates in BookWright? And then how do you, yes, and there was a second part of their question, but I'm gonna skip that. So making custom templates is really easy, and the short answer to the question is yes. So when you're inside of Blurb BookWright, you can design a template, name that template, save it, and it ends up in a little folder, a little drop-down folder that says My Layouts. And you can repurpose that same template over and over again instead of having to rebuild it, or instead of having to use a pre-made template that Blurb has made. I use this all the time. So if I'm starting a journal and I realize that every 10th page on that journal on the left-hand side is I want a certain look or feel, I don't want to have to rebuild it every time. I create the template, I save it, and it's there in the drop-down menu anytime I want to go back and repurpose it. And I think one of the things about learning a piece of software, especially if you're going to make multiple books in the future, is the key is the idea of efficiency. And bookmaking becomes a lot more fun when the process is efficient. So for example, if Melissa is doing pen and ink illustrations all day long, and she's scanning those pen and ink illustrations and scanning them and at the correct size and having them in a folder that she can easily retrieve them from, when it comes time for her to sit down and make a book, she knows exactly where her work is and the images are the right size, and she brings them into the software, and it's a very efficient workflow. And I think what happens is the more efficient you are, the more fun it is to make books and journals and notebooks, because you're not struggling with the logistics. So building your own templates is fun and very strategic. Another question that came in was about making notebooks in Lightroom. And currently, Lightroom, you can do magazines, trade books, and photo books, but there's no specific notebook option. So again, BookWright is definitely the direction you want to take with that. Anything else? Does anyone else have any? Anyone see any more questions in the chat or anything? Another question about archived. I think, yes, there will be a recording of the webinar. That's come in a few times. I think we might be at the end of the Q&A. What do you think? Are there any other questions that someone is asking to say something about magazines? This isn't really a magazine webinar, but I'm trying to remember if we've done a magazine webinar in the past, but if we haven't, we will be doing one in the future because it's a great topic. I absolutely love the magazine format. I think that is the end of the, someone's asking about matte soft covers as an option instead of glossy. And unfortunately, this is from Anne. Unfortunately, Anne, right now, the cover option is the same material that I'm showing here. So it is a glossy cover. Now there's an upside and a potential downside, depending if you're not a big fan of glossy covers. The great thing about this is it's incredibly durable. And one of the downsides of uncoated materials or matte materials historically is that they don't age very well. So they look amazing. They're personally my favorite. I wish we had uncoated options on everything we make, but I also realize they don't last nearly as long. However, if you ever get to the point where you want to make a large order, let's say several hundred, if not several thousand copies, let's say that you made something that you think that there's a mass market for, you can do matte covers in large volume, high run orders. So I'm actually experimenting with that myself right now. But as of right now, it is, we are glossy only. And I think I've got one more question coming in here via the telephone. Someone wants me to go over about the difference between notebooks and photo books because the sound cut out apparently when I was doing that before. So notebooks and photo books are very different. Notebooks and journals are going to be based on a chassis, if you will, that's called a trade book, which is either 5x8, 6x9, or 8x10 format. And these are the journal books and notebooks and trade books in general are less expensive than photo books, and the sizes are different. Again, they're the three that I just mentioned, and the materials are different. And the materials are not better or worse than a photography book. They're just very different, and they're priced differently. Photo books, larger in size typically, so you have 7x7, 8x10, 12x12, 11x13, etc. And your material choices are different. So you've got different paper choices, you've got different end sheet choices, and again, when you get up into the high volume runs, you can do customizations and things like that. So oftentimes, this is what I do, and this is what I just did with my latest journal. Is one of the great things about print-on-demand printing, which is like what Blurb does, printing one book or one journal at a time, is that you're not limited to using one format. So I have a magazine series I started called Essay, and it's published in two sizes. It's published in magazine and trade book. And so I recently created a journal that was an 8x10 journal based on the magazine. So now that I have, and eventually when I have when I have enough material for a best of, I'll do a photo book that represents the best of the stories that ran in the magazine. So ultimately I'll have a high-end photo book, I'll have both a magazine and a trade book, and then I'll have a journal series that complements the rest of the objects. A platform of products based on the same concept, the same magazine story idea. So again, if you're new to Blurb and you're just experimenting and you're just testing, I think notebooks are a great place to start because they're affordable, they're fun, and they're not necessarily as complicated as making something like a photography book, which may take you a long time to edit and sequence. You may have to write something for it. And notebooks can be a sort of a gateway into the rest of your bookmaking world. So I think we have come to the end of the webinar and the Q&A. It has been a roller coaster, to say the least. I just lost video of Michelle and Melissa, so I think they're out there in the ether somewhere. And literally, it sounds like something just landed on the roof of my house. So this is probably a good to stop the webinar. I want to thank again Melissa and Michelle for spending time with us and giving us that great presentation. And I'm sorry for any of the technical issues that people might have had along the way. Again, this is going to be archived and put on YouTube. And we will be back next month with yet another webinar. And we hope to see you then. And thanks again to Melissa and Michelle. I can't hear you or see you.
Thanks.
So,
well, thank you. We had a great time.
Voices are back. Your cameras are gone. Again, thanks for being with us. And congratulations on all the great work that you made.
Bye, thanks.